everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Number One Comics Podcast. This is the only podcast dedicated to first issues. I'm your host, Jonah. With me is my co-host, Bill. Bill, how's it going?
Good, Jonah. How are you?
Excellent. I'm doing well. You ready for springtime?
Oh, yeah.
I'm getting there. I'm so tired of this sub-zero temperatures.
Yeah.
We'll get there. We'll get there eventually.
Yeah.
So what we're talking about today is Union Jack. This is published by Marvel Comics. Back in November of 2006 was the cover date on this, and it retailed for $2.99. Writer was Christos Gage. Artist was Mike Perkins. Now, are you familiar with Union Jack as a character?
Not really.
Okay. Have you ever read any other Union Jack or seen Union Jack?
Before this one, no.
Okay. So this was your first experience with Union Jack.
I think I remember... I don't think I ever saw like a trading card of him or anything like that. I think I remember seeing him in like another kind of like Captain Britain kind of comic, but I don't remember specifically.
I don't know, because I'm with you. I don't think I ever saw a Union Jack trading card. Like, I don't know that there ever was one that I can think of.
Yeah.
I don't. That's a good question.
I know I've heard of the character prior to reading this, but I don't know specifically where.
And that's one of the reasons why I like having you on this show with me, is because you are not as tuned in to you know, the comic book world as I am, or as some other people may be. And so I like that, the perspective you bring to it.
Yeah.
Versus if it was me and another, comic book fanboy sitting around. And so you bring a different perspective to this than I do, because a lot of times I'm biased with this stuff because I've read the series before. I know the character pretty well.
Yeah.
And so I like that. So keep that coming. Don't read comics unless I give you. Well, Union Jack, he first appeared back in 1976. Oh, okay. So he's been around for a while. He first appeared back in Invaders #7. There have been a few different individuals to don the identity. The first was a gentleman named Lord Falsworth, which just sounds rich. And then our current Jack is a character named Joey Chapman, who was actually a friend of Falsworth's grandson.
Okay.
Now, Union Jack usually fights vampires, which you kind of got that even from this issue, because he's starting off fighting vampires.
Right.
He was always taking on vampires for one reason or another. Britain's got a lot of vampires, I guess.
Yeah.
He's an athlete in peak physical condition. He does have low-level enhanced strength, speed, and endurance, but he's really not... He's not like even Captain America level superhuman. He's kind of your average dude. His weapons include pistols, and a silver dagger. When you're fighting vampires, you got to have a silver dagger.
Of course.
On the cover, we've got our titular character in the foreground. Filling out the background is a map with several areas targeted. Mm-hmm. And I one thing on the cover, and one of the reasons why I picked this up, because I was not super familiar with Union Jack before this. I'm trying to think if I'd read, if he appeared. I know I've read some like the Invaders, even the Invaders Now, but I cannot remember if those came before or after me reading this. But the one thing I want to mention is I love his costume.
Yeah.
It is such a cool costume design.
It is.
The colors, the way the Union Jack is incorporated into it, the brown pouches against the blue and red, and the weaponry. He's badass looking. So I love the cover.
He reminds me, I know this is like totally obscure, but it kind of reminds me of like a character you'd see in like Metal Gear Solid.
Very much
or something like that.
Yeah, I could see that.
Like one of those type of games, like Splinter Cell, Metal Gear Solid, something like that.
Yeah, 100%. You could put this as a skin in like a Modern Warfare type Call of Duty game, and it would look just fine. Yeah. So let's talk about the issue itself. Let's dive in and go through a quick synopsis. We open with our main character by day in his civilian identity as a painter. His coworkers discuss grabbing a pint after their shift. But the hero's got other work to tend to. That work is eradicating a couple of those blood-sucking vampires that I'd mentioned. Through some internal monologuing, he tells us that these are the last 3 vampires in London, so he's clearly been doing a good job. As he's taking them out, a helicopter shows up and aids him in dispatching the last one. The chopper is actually there to retrieve Jack because MI5 would like a word with him. So he's taken to the MI5 headquarters. Jack is greeted by a man named Gavin. Gavin fills Jack in, as well as us, the readers, in on a terrorist organization called RAID, which stands for Radically Advanced Ideas in Destruction. Have you ever heard of AIM, Advanced Ideas Mechanics? This is sort of like the ultra-violent cell or offshoot of AIM, I believe. RAID is targeting multiple strikes in London, and this is like within hours. So luckily, Jack's not going to be working alone. He is going to have some help in the form of Sabra, who she's an Israeli Mossad agent. Mm-hmm. We also have a new Arabian Knight, and then there is a SHIELD liaison named Contessa Allegra Valentina de La Fontaine. Mm-hmm. Try saying that 3 times fast.
Right.
We are just going to call her Contessa for short for the rest of this. These characters kind of get together and meet. There's immediate tension between the Arabian Knight and Sabra. Jack steps in to stop them from fighting with one another and says they really don't have the time for that. Gavin introduces the team to a prisoner named Farouk. His body is comprised of electromagnetic energy, so he is being held in a Faraday cage, which that's a chamber that can't be penetrated by electromagnetic transmissions. Farouk was captured infiltrating MI5's computer network, and not willing to risk death over it, he decides to cooperate. Farouk explains that he aided several people and villains to enter Britain undetected by messing with the TSA equipment, so to speak. So he's allowing these villains to come into the country. These enhanced villains, and they name a number of them: Shockwave, Boomerang, Firebrand, Jack-o'-lantern. Farouk tells them that the attacks are all going to happen at 4 p.m. today. Mm-hmm. So you've essentially got 10 supervillains and just hours to find them. So it really sounds like an impossible task. Jack wants to call in help, but evidently there is none available. Not even Captain Britain or Micromax are available. He wants to announce an evacuation to Britain, but Gavin disagrees. So with no time to waste, Jack remembers that 2 of the villains were associates of Batroc the Leaper, or Batrosh the Leaper, however you want to say it. Mm-hmm. And so they figured they're going to find him first, because it wouldn't be the first time that he had turned on his partners when it came to stopping them from using weapons of mass destruction. So maybe worth a try. So the team tracks down Batrosh. He's not very forthcoming with the information on his comrades. He kicks and leaps his way to escaping them, but he left behind a clue when he left his phone on the table. And that phone had the number of Zarin, one of the attackers. So they place a call to Zarin and are able to triangulate his location, which is just outside the House of Parliament. While that's happening, more of the tension builds between Sabra and the Arabian Knight. It starts to boil over. We cut then to essentially 10 minutes later. We're outside the House of Parliament. Jack and his really dysfunctional team have engaged the would-be attackers on a rooftop. The Arabian Knight faces off against Machete. The Knight breaks Machete's blades, but Machete is able to throw what's left of the blade into the Knight's chest. He's then blasted from behind with an electrical jolt from Sabra. Jack and Contessa are pinned down by gunfire. Contessa will handle the gunman while Jack takes care of Zarin. They break cover. Jack battles Zarin. Zarin drives his sai into Jack's chest, piercing his armor. But Jack is able to choke Zarin into surrendering. Contessa was able to take out the 2 gunmen. Sabra tends to the Knight's chest wound. She sees that it's really only a scratch, and he informs her that the previous Arabian Knight had a magical carpet he would fly around on, and it was controlled mentally. when he took over as Arabian Knight, he basically had the carpet unraveled and made into his uniform. So it can, harden to resist any blow, basically on mental command. Jack is questioning their captured prey, only to learn that no cell knows anything about what any of the others are doing, and that Parliament had been evacuated, so they were going to go to Plan B, which was massive civilian casualties, was kind of their aim. There's only 4 hours to go at this point. Jack feels he's got no choice, so what he does is he hops in front of the news cameras and calls for a mass evacuation. Back at MI5, Jack and Gavin, they continue to disagree about the call to evacuate the city. Jack believes that they're just notifying the city's wealthy and powerful and leaving everyone else to die, whether by plane, train, automobile, or on foot. Jack thinks that everyone should at least have a chance. Gavin corrects him and says, and I'm not going to even bother to do like a British accent on this. Gavin corrects him, and he's basically like, "You're an idiot. You haven't saved them. You've killed them." And he goes on to say, "You're the protector of the common man, then protect them from this." And Gavin shows Jack news reports from all over the city about explosions going off. London Tower Bridge, the tunnel or the channel, Heathrow Airport, all of these explosions have already gone off. Essentially, Jack's already lost in the first issue, and that kind of wraps it up. That's where we end.
Right.
What were your thoughts on this as kind of a first issue?
So I have to make a quick side note on this. This is dated November 2006.
Yep.
I was surprised to see a Got Milk ad in there because I thought those ended like way back in the 90s.
Oh, man, I don't remember. So Got Milk was after Does Your Body Good?
Yeah.
Where the girl grows up into Kelly Kapowski?
Yeah.
Okay.
So, like, you'd always see those, especially in comic books, you'd always see the Got Milk. They'd have, like, sports superstars or whoever. They'd have the little mustache.
Yep.
Anyway, I was surprised to see a Got Milk ad in this comic. But getting back on track, I really liked it. It was kind of like a James Bond or like a Mission Impossible with superheroes. Mm-hmm. I do like Raid because it did incorporate some of those lesser-known supervillains that I am familiar with.
Yep.
Like Jack-O-Lantern. I love Jack-O-Lantern.
There was a lot of
one of the cooler ones.
Not even B-lister, like C and D-lister villains included in this.
Yeah.
Because, Zarin, Machete, I'd never heard of those guys, but I do remember there was a couple of names on there where I was like, I know that guy. That looks familiar. That was kind of cool to see.
Yeah.
So it was funny because I was going back, or as I was going through this, I was kind of going back through some other Union Jack, because I've got some Invaders issues. I have actually, and I know I picked it up after this, but I went back and picked up another Union Jack miniseries that I think was maybe from the 90s, if I'm not mistaken. Mm-hmm. And then I also had dug out some old, like, Knights of Pendragon. Pendragon?
Sure.
Pendragon? I don't know. Anyway, some old Knights of Pendragon from the Marvel UK, and I believe one of those was he was featured in one of those that I had, even though I didn't really remember him at that time when I read it years and years ago.
Right.
So I'd really forgotten all about him until Ed Brubaker used him in his excellent Captain America run, which is what this miniseries comes out of.
Oh, okay.
And so he was in that run, and then this miniseries came from his appearance there. This miniseries, it's really not your traditional superhero story. Yeah. One is, I think that the characters are not they're not street level, but they're not overly powerful.
Right.
This is definitely kind of more James Bondish than an Avengers book or Justice League or any of those, right? Yeah. It's kind of cool that way. It amps up the Mission Impossible to save the city vibe, which I thought was very cool. But it's definitely toned down in the way of like over the top superheroics.
Yeah.
Were you familiar with Arabian Night or Sabra?
I wasn't familiar with really any of the characters. I think Contessa Valentino, whatever her name is. I know her, of course, from a couple appearances in the MCU.
Yep.
Jack-o'-lantern, I was familiar with him. But yeah, I guess I'm not really that familiar with a lot of the like UK-based
right
stuff, which was really refreshing for me because, you know, everything I read in the 90s was based in New York.
Yep.
It was like,
I never read an issue of Excalibur as a kid.
Yeah.
I got some issues of Excalibur, but I'd never really gotten super into that series as a kid. So I'm with you there. Like I didn't have much to do with it or know much about it. Sabra, I knew her only because I remember I was at a Walden Books years and years ago, and they had a paperback. It was kind of a thick paperback. It was one of the official handbooks of the Marvel Universe.
Oh, okay.
From like the early 90s, maybe.
I remember those,
And the one I got is the one that it was the S's. And so she was featured in that. So I'd read about her, but I'd never actually read a comic with her in it.
Right.
But I knew of her from that. Arabian Night, I wasn't really familiar with at all until reading this. There's a little emphasis on their power and abilities, but again, they're pretty mild.
Yeah.
Again, there's no Wolverine in this issue. There's no
exactly, and I think like if you had the Avengers in this, the bridge and like Heathrow Airport and that sort of stuff probably wouldn't be blown up.
Yeah, it would have been totally different.
Yeah.
For sure, and yeah, the whole.
There's more espionage than action.
Yes, correct.
And I like that about this.
Yep, this is more Captain America Winter Soldier movie or Mission Impossible than, an Avengers Endgame type thing.
Yeah.
For sure. Mike Perkins' art is awesome in this. It's really well suited to this type of story because it captures that sense of realism that it's maintaining. And I think it helps that Mike Perkins, so Christos Gage is not British. Mike Perkins, though, is.
Okay.
And so having an artist that knows kind of what they're drawing and being from there, I think really lends itself to that realism as well.
Right.
I am definitely a sucker for cliffhangers in comics. And the end of this is a huge cliffhanger in which the characters have already seemingly lost. And I remember reading this when it came out, and I've got the entire miniseries. I totally forgot that's how it ended, though.
Yeah.
And so when I got to it, I was like, shit, they've already lost. What do they do now?
I don't know if there's like a specific name for the trope in comics when the villains win, or like when the bad guys win, but kind of like in Watchmen.
Yeah, when Ozymandias is like, I've already done it.
Yeah, it's like,
thing. Yeah.
I wouldn't be sitting here telling you my grand plan if there was a chance of you stopping it. It already
it happened.
It happened 30 minutes ago.
Yeah, it happened. Yeah, for sure.
So it's kind of refreshing to see.
Yeah, I like that. It definitely threw me off, and it made me interested to see what's going to come next, or how do they recover from this? How do they stop this?
Yeah.
It was an excellent way to end the issue. I like the tension between Gavin and Jack, as well as the tension between Sabra and Arabian Night. Both of which, like I said, they're really characters I'm not terribly familiar with, but they're pretty well fleshed out in this.
Yeah.
I was familiar with a few of those D-list thugs, but the two I mentioned, Machete and Zarin, no idea who they were. That cameo by Batrosh is always entertaining to me. He's just a cool looking character, and he's smarmy, he's arrogant. I think I first saw him in like Punisher during the Euro Hit storyline when he was overseas in Europe, is where I first saw him. If you're out there, looking for good comics, if you're looking for something that's more spy thriller than superhero, I think this is definitely a good read, and it's something that I would recommend. Any other notes on that, and then we'll wrap up with a little of what came next?
No, I think that's it.
Excellent. So in terms of what came next, aside from the Captain America arc that I'd mentioned, Union Jack, he often appeared alongside the Invaders. There'd been a few teams which... these are characters like Namor, Captain America, the original Human Torch. There was a New Invaders miniseries back in 2004. Okay, so I did not pick that up until after reading this. I kind of went back to find that as well. There was also a series titled Invaders Now in 2010, which I have, and he's featured in that as well. In 2020, he did appear in a 5-issue miniseries called The Union, I believe it is, if I'm not mistaken. And then most recently in 2024, there was a tie-in of Marvel's Blood Hunt called Union Jack the Ripper. And obviously, if you're going to have an entire event around vampires, you've got to have one of your, preeminent vampire hunters featured in it. I haven't read that because when Blood Hunt came out, I told myself, one is comic events is what largely drove me away from comics back in like the late 2000s.
Yeah.
I just got burnt on it and crossovers and tie-ins. And so getting back into comics, and Blood Hunt was, kind of the big event of last summer. I think it was in the summertime. I swore, I was like, I'm only going to read the main story. I'm not going to read any of the tie-ins. Well, then they had a tie-in called Midnight Suns.
Yes.
If it's got Midnight Suns on it, I'm gonna buy it.
Oh, man.
And even then, it was just okay. Like, I wished I hadn't.
Right.
I could have saved the money on it. So I did not read any of the other tie-ins. So I'd not read the Union Jack the Ripper story yet. So I may check it out at some point if I can find it cheaply. But that's about what came next.
And this is a 4-part series, correct? This was an ongoing.
Yes, this was just part. Yeah, this was a mini series.
Okay, so have you read all 4 parts of it?
Yes, yeah.
Did they kind of wrap it up by issue 4, or did it like lead into another?
No, they did a good job of wrapping it up. If I recall correctly, because it's been 20 years almost since I've read it.
Right.
That's weird to think.
Right.
But if I recall correctly, it was all wrapped up pretty well. So,
okay.
Yeah. I mean, I'll probably go back and read them again sooner than later. So,
well, I definitely, this is one as just somebody who knows nothing about the character and reading it for the very first time definitely hooked me in. So I
will loan them to you and you can read them as well.
All right. So sounds good.
I'll bring them to you the next time. So excellent. Well, that's going to do us for this episode. Again, you like espionage and superheroics, check out this Union Jack story arc. It was a great read. So I liked it a lot. Be sure to hit that like button, subscribe. You can find us. Just look up Field of Geeks on YouTube or on Apple Podcasts. You can follow us on the #1 Comic Podcast on Facebook. We release or try to release a new episode every week. So we will see you next week for our next episode. Until then, I'm Jonah. This is Bill. We'll see you then.